Welcome, everybody, to the Finding Your Path panel. Thanks for being here, Wanda and Deanne. I think I'll do a little introduction of both of you to the audience. So, Deanne Foley is a Canadian feature film and TV director and writer. She's the director of the critically acclaimed feature film An Audience of Chairs, which picked up 4 awards at Finn. She also did Relative Happiness, which was nominated for Best Picture at the 2015 Directors Guild of Canada Awards and the Borso's Best Canadian Feature at Whistler Film Festival. And Beat Down, her first feature film, garnered 3 Canadian Comedy Award nominations, including Best Direction. She's directed on CBC's Republic of Doyle and recently directed the Lifetime Movie of the Week Christmas Reservation, starring Melissa Joan Hart, who many of us remember as Sabrina the Teenage Witch from some of our childhoods. I guess not everyone was a child then. And is member of the Directors Guild of Canada and the Writers Guild of Canada. Wanda Nolan, also joining us, is a writer, story consultant, and filmmaker who lives in St. John's, Newfoundland. She regularly does research and story consulting work for the NFB, story edits feature films and television projects, and she teaches screenwriting in St. John's. In March 2020, she was visiting artist at the University of British Columbia's creative writing program. She's written and directed 3 short films of her own, most recently the Michelle Jackson Award-winning film Always Going, Never Gone, which I believe is available on CBC Gem.
And it's not, that one's not Michelle Jackson, that's an IFCO. Yeah.
Oh, that was Picture Start.
Yeah, Picture Start, yeah.
I worked on that, I should have known, but...
You were awesome to work with.
Thank you. And to anyone in the audience who wants to know who I am, I'm Andrea Dunne. I'm an assistant director, which is what I did on Wanda's film. And I also make my own short films and sometimes even plays. So I'm going to lead this little discussion on finding your path is our topic. So I'm just going to start with opening up to these great ladies. Can you guys tell me a little bit about your path so far? Deanne, do you want to go first?
Okay. We're so polite. I'm like, Wanda, who wants to go first? Yeah, I would say it took me a long time to finally get the courage to really jump into filmmaking and say, I want to be a filmmaker. I think I always wanted to be a filmmaker from when I was really young, but I didn't really see that as a possibility growing up in the suburbs of St. John's. There weren't like a lot of other peers or role models in my community that I saw that this was an option for me. So I studied English, theater, and arts at Memorial University. So I did English, but I did a theater stream. And that was like the closest thing that brought me to working with actors or working within being able to tell stories. And I think that's ultimately what I wanted to do. So that was sort of like my first step in terms of working with actors. And I absolutely love that experience and doing that program. And then, I guess I always struggled with, wanting to be a filmmaker, but how could I actually make that happen? And it was always like this pull between choosing the safe path versus doing what I wanted to do, which was to make films. And I think when you're a young person and you're like, and you're even 18 and you're in your early 20s and you're trying to figure out where you belonged. And I think it took me a long time to say, to find where I belonged, which I believe was making films. And and so I did a degree at MUN, and then again, film school there weren't people in my community that were really going to film school. So I ended up doing a master's program in Dublin at the University College Dublin. And, I was kind of like pulling between doing something practical, like doing law, or what I really wanted to do was be a filmmaker. So, okay, I go to Dublin, I do a master's program, and I spend all my time doing theater at that university. And then also in my spare time, just seeing films and spending time at the Irish Film Center and seeing every play that I could afford at the Gate or the Abbey. And I think anyone from the outside could have told me, like, why are you torturing yourself and, you know, doing this master's program that really doesn't fulfill you? Like, it was still something that I really struggled with. And so it wasn't until I moved to Halifax, like after I'd done 2 degrees and I taught English in Korea. And I'm like, I was just like fumbling around in my 20s, just trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. And then my friend, one of my really good friends, who was living in Halifax, said, you know what? They're making movies here in Halifax. Like, Hollywood movies are being made here. I think you know, come live on my couch, and, you know, maybe you could work on one of these big productions. It looks like they're desperate for people to be part of the crew. And so that's what I did. I basically left and went to Halifax. I lived on my friend's couch and then eventually moved to the foyer, which became my bedroom, and we only used the back door. So, you know, I basically found myself in Halifax, and my first job was not actually being a crew person. I applied to do extras background assistant. I didn't get it. And then I ended up finding a job at CTV, they're looking for a development and production coordinator. And I worked with Johanna Montgomery. So that was actually my first job in the industry, which, you know, I wasn't close to set. I wasn't close to making a film. But what that job gave me was I got to know all the industry players, not only in Nova Scotia, but in Atlantic Canada. And I think that was really important because I also got to see how projects came together, how producers worked with broadcasters, and also really how it just all of a sudden introduced me to a community. And so once I had this part-time job working at CTV, I just started taking a whack of courses at AFCOOP, which is very similar to NIFCO here in Newfoundland, which was, they had a program there called Short Works. And any workshop that was offered, I just took it, like whether it was in costume design or if it was in cinematography or production management, I just took it all. I just wanted to understand how a movie worked. And I figured if I was going to be a director, I really wanted to understand how all the departments work and how it really all kind of came together. And so, yeah, so it was that program that I actually got to make a first short. So I was 28 years old when I made my first short, which was this, 10-minute film that I shot on 16 millimeter, and it was called Trombone Trouble. And, I had really had, even though I did a script writing workshop, I don't really feel like I was a screenwriter. I just wrote a really kind of personal story. I was a kid who was forced to play trombone. And so I figured, okay, well, I'll write what I know, and I know about this experience. And that sort of launched me into the world of filmmaking, and sort of haven't looked back since. That was a long story, long story.
It was your path. It was how you found it.
It was a long journey, also equals into a long story.
Wanda, how about you?
Similar to Deanne, it took me a long time to kind of find that path. Like, I was from a young age, like really young age, I wanted to be a writer. And I wrote, like, until before I even got published, I was writing fiction first. I was writing that whole time. But I never had confidence. That was my big Achilles heel. And similarly, I grew up in rural Newfoundland. I didn't know any artists. I didn't know that was something I could do, something I aspired to do. And I felt like it was this lofty thing that other people did, that like people like me didn't get to do. And just a confidence thing that I didn't have for a long time, but I wrote all the time. And when I moved to Halifax, I had a writing community there, and I took writing workshops all the time and stuff like that, but I never sent anything out. And in Halifax, I found this amazing writing community that we met through a workshop group. And still, even within that group, I was just we were editing each other's work, but they were sending stuff out. I still wasn't sending anything out. It was just this weird, unfortunate kind of mindset that I had. And then finally, years into it. I think I was moving home and I sent out my first, short story, and it got published, and then I sent out more, and they got published. And so then I was like, okay. And I realized, and this is something I've talked about in my other classes and stuff, is like, it wasn't getting the no, because I expect the no. It was the sending it out the door, like just getting past my own bullshit and just sending it out. So if I can say to anybody on their paths, is like, just put stuff out there. And so things started to get published. And then I moved to Newfoundland, where once again, I didn't have that community. So, but you go out and seek it. So I did the 4th level fiction classes at MUN and met some great people there, and got on the Writers Alliance board, and then applied for my master's at UBC in creative writing, and fiction was going to be my thing. That was it. And then I did a summer residency at UBC, and I wrote my first short film. And my instructor, my screenwriting instructor, Sarah Grave, who's worked in television but has been a mentor to me, she was like this super introverted person. I always thought film was for like extroverts. So that like just meeting her and just going, okay, like you don't have to be an extrovert to do this thing. So I wrote that short. I got an Arts and Letter Award. Then it ended up being Dana Warren directed it for a NIFCO Picture Start. So then I kind of was on set, and I just fell in love with that. And the other part I fell in love with too is it got optioned as a feature. So I got paid $10,000 for, and it went into development as a feature. And that was like, that paid for my UBC, or most of my UBC tuition, which was quite expensive. And it really, that set me on that course. And interestingly, that one short film also kind of started my research and development careers, or story consultant career, because Annette Clark, who was a producer at the NFB at the time, now she's executive producer. I saw her at a secondhand store. She had seen the film. She's like, oh, I loved your film. And then later she sent me this message saying, do you want to do some research for us? And it's like, sure. And it ended up that I worked on that project for 2 years, and I was in the editing room and just giving lots of notes. So I got a story consultant credit, which got me into the Writers Guild of Canada. And during that time also, then I was writing other features. I won a Harold Greenberg Award for a feature I wrote. So I fell into the film and screenwriting world, which I loved. And I'd always been a cinephile. I took whatever film courses I could at the university, at MUN or wherever. And yeah, so it kind of was like this wonderful kind of way, and that just grew. And as a researcher, I think because I'm such a story geek, I was able to give notes on other things besides. I think I could find things that resonated emotionally and also cinematically for the directors. So that's really grown my career. So I work with all kinds of different directors right now at the NFB, and I do story consult with features, and I've started in television too, which is really exciting. And also I'm making my own stuff, so it's and I get to work with Deanne sometimes. We've a few times collaborated on things, which has been great. And yeah, one of the things I'd like to say, and we've chatted about, is that there is this whole world of development that I don't think people realize. Not everything goes to production. When you think about the number of, for example, feature films that are actually greenlit in the country, it's a small number that are made, but there's a lot that can go into development. You can get paid for rounds of development, and unfortunately they may not all get there for a gazillion of reasons, but it's so that's been my path. So I'm making my first documentary now with the National Film Board, which is exciting too. So
that is exciting.
Yeah.
So just moving forward on what you just said about development. So you've kind of got two paths that you have going on right now with making your own films and your short films and your documentary, and working development on other people's scripts or other people's documentaries. Do you feel like those paths kind of help each other or hinder each other? Is it a balancing act?
Sometimes, because I need to generate that extra money to, pay my bills. So, it can be about, if I take on too much, I don't have time for my other work. I always learn something from the other directors, which is amazing. But yeah, there's that fine line. So I really try to plan out my year. So if I know of projects that have early, which is great, then I can kind of say no to other things. But if the projects come later, then I kind of have to say yes. So over the years, I've kind of learned to balance it. I kind of know what's coming up in the year, and And like this year especially, I'm working with 2 directors with the film board now. And I'm saying no to other projects just because I really want to concentrate on some of my own that I'm doing. And so it is a balance. Like, you know, we all know what it's like. You got to pay the bills too. So, you know, but you need time to create. Like, you need that space, you need that time, and so I try to schedule that out. Like, I'm not a writer who writes every day, so I'll schedule out blocks of time to create different, like, on different things I'm working on. With the documentary, like, I'm continually working on that now because I'm actually being paid for that development time, so that's different. But for that stuff that because we always have to be, hey Deanne, like the next year, like we have to also have the irons in the fire and ideas that we're creating for like the next projects, and that's unpaid work that we then apply for development. So you're constantly juggling. It's and there's no right answer, you know, for that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I find that myself in balancing my creative with the assistant directing I do. There's a lot of trying to say no. And sometimes you don't want to. Sometimes you really like the people who are asking you to help them, but you have to write someday. Deanne, do you find you're doing a constant balancing act as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is really, like, you know, my passion really is making features, but you don't really get to do that every year. So you're kind of, it takes a long time to get a feature off the ground. So then you're also, you know, trying to develop other ideas for television. Like, I just want to work. Like, I just want to always kind of push and challenge myself and as a director. And I've sort of gotten back to my writing again. I kind of put that on the back burner for the last little while. And so, you know, for me, it's like, okay, oh, yeah, of course you want to work on different projects and you want to direct, but then sometimes it's always the challenge of, you know, you always had that passion project that you're slowly pushing up the hill. So yeah, I think it's definitely challenging to, you know, make it all work. I mean, I feel like in the past, like I've always, you know, rightly or wrongly put a lot of eggs in one basket. Like, when I was doing in my early work, like with Beatdown, or honestly with my 3 features, I was betting on that horse to win. And I put a lot of time and effort into those projects, which could have easily stalled out. And I think, you know, because I had, you know, obviously great producers and there was a lot of other great people that kind of pushed that project with me, I was kind of lucky that happened. But there's a ton of projects that I work on that don't ever get made, you know? So I think that's sort of the struggle. For me, it's like, you know, what horse am I betting on? You know, who's going to win this race? And that's sort of like kind of how I see it when I'm working on various projects. And like, you know, there's a feature that I still want to make. And I think, you know, it's at least that script is probably, I don't know, I would say like 6 years old, you know, that I'm still kind of like going back to and thinking like I think there's also like the right time for a project. Like, I also get hired as a director. And so I love that. Like, I love that it's like in television, if you get hired and it's a set amount of time, like it's already been written, all the producing is done. You just kind of show up, you do your work and you kind of walk away from it. Whereas when you're doing feature work, there's just so much time and this big part of your heart that's in the project. So I think that's what I'm always kind of, you know, trying to figure out, like working for hire. And also, you know, just to kind of roll back on that, like someone said to me really early on, he said, you know, and this person said, she said, do you want to work on your own dreams or do you want to work on other people's dreams? And when I was really young, that really sat with me. I'm like, no, I want to work on my own dreams. I want to tell my own stories. I want to make my own films. And I've always, at the end of the day, I know that was important to me. So, you know, I think you kind of have to, not that there's anything wrong with working on other people's dreams. I also get satisfaction on that as well. But I think early on, I was very clear that I was a director and I was going to call myself director, and that's what I was going to do. I didn't want to kind of fall into other areas where, you know, all of a sudden all I was doing was editing, which is a great thing to do, but you know, it's hard to kind of balance sometimes those roles. And if you do, that's amazing. But for me, I think it was very clear that I always wanted to kind of work on my own dreams.
That's great. Speaking of working on other people's dreams, what is something I've gotten from what you guys have said so far is the importance of other people in finding your path, whether it's someone who lets you sleep on their couch or a director who you're story editing for, who you learn something from yourself. Is there anything you wanted to say about how to find the people who will help you find your own way in the world?
Yeah, I think when I first moved to Halifax, I definitely found my community when I was doing those workshops. And the workshop that was like the directing workshop, I actually met Ian McLeod, who has been my collaborator on and off for the last 20 years. And so I think whether you're lucky enough to go to say like for a film school or, you know, the Canadian Film Center or wherever you might find yourself, I think that's when you find your people. Or whether you're doing Picture Start at NIFCO or the First Time Film course, I think you find your people. And I think I was really lucky in Halifax to surround myself with a lot of like-minded people who were interested in telling stories like I was. And when in that first year, like after I made my first short, myself and this other filmmaker, emerging filmmaker, Rohan Fernando, and I kind of came up with the idea of like, let's do an anthology film. And so we tried to get some development money, and we reached out to Trisha Fish and Mike Melsky and Mike Clattenburg and Andrea Dorfman. And we all kind of got together. This project never went anywhere. We basically got a little bit of money to do some writing, but it kind of created a bit of community for me. And honestly, I would say Trisha Fish became a mentor to me. Like I would send her my little bit of writing that I would do, and she would just basically just always say, keep going. And I think that's what you need. You need to find your believers. And I would think someone like Annette Clark for me as well, early in my career, just kind of saw something in me. And I would say Paul Pope as well. Like, you know, yeah, I took you seriously. And I think if you're serious about, I'm not sure, I'm probably going off book here, but if you're serious about what you want to do, you know, you will drive it forward. And I think rightly or wrongly, or I would say blindly, I was very tenacious and driven, and that somehow I was going to make a feature. Like it was very clear in my mind that that's why I entered the industry. And so even though it took me 11 years from the time of making my first short to making a feature, like that was my goal. And I never lost sight of that. But there's a lot of people, this is kind of going back to your point of finding your community. There are so many people that I leaned on during that time that helped me get there.
I think if you show up, you will find your community. If you're passionate and if you're passionate about this work, you will find your community if you show up to those places, because all the geeks you attract each other, it happens. And I've really found that even in my low confidence years, I still was like, the geekdom you can't hide. I always had to be around me that way. Yeah, that, and I think also showing up to the work when you're working with other people, like Annette Clark has been a massive mentor to me, and Sarah Grafe at UBC was a mentor to me, and like Annette was the person that was like, I want you to direct. Like I had submitted a film to the NFB with thinking someone else would direct it, and she was like, no, I want you to direct it. You can direct this. And that really helped so much, like directing a film, because it took me, I had to find my confidence, and when I did that, it's like, you have to, as a director, you have to step up, you have to take responsibility for everything, all the mistakes, all the things. And it was hard. Like I found that hard, like to be the person in charge, but it was awesome, great too. And it really, it just pushed a lot of bullshit to the side and for me. And yeah, it's like, now I want to continue directing. I want to direct my first feature. I want those things to happen. And yeah, it's finding the people, but I think it's also just, you have to come with the passion, you know, and you will meet those people, and those like Jill Knox Goss was the person who optioned my first my short. You know, people will, yeah, people will encourage you, and people in power will help you if you are showing passion and you're about the work, not about all the bullshit. Like, not about, you really have to show up to the work, because there is a difference sometimes. Like, the idea that you're going to get any fame or any kind of massive amount of money is probably not going to happen. You know what I mean? But
But you're both rich and famous, right?
oh yeah, God, yeah, for sure. Well, Deanne is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Deep pockets here.
But I think, you know, that's what people respond to when you're passionate about this. It's a slog, it's a lot of work, and being able to collaborate, being interested in the project, really wanting to make the project the best it can be, and kind of taking out your, you know, the personal stuff, and just, you know, really seeing that as a piece of work that you can shape together is so fun and so fulfilling. And you find those people, you know. Mm-hmm.
And
So go to workshops, go to all the things.
yeah. One of the ways that people find that sometimes is through film school, but neither of you did go to film school, right?
No.
Because that's a question I find always comes up in these discussions of how to get where you're going, is whether or not to go to film school. But I guess I'm taking from what I'm seeing is that it's a path, but definitely not the only path.
You don't have to. I mean, I think there's lots of opportunities that can come from a film school, but I really think you should make some stuff before you go to skip film school. Like, I think you really should kind of get a sense of the world, you know, just doing things on your own or whatever. Like, but Andrew, you mentioned if you're going to do like a BA or something, why not do an undergrad in film? So, you know, that's actually a really, really good point. So, yeah, I think everybody has their own path. And in St. John's, like, I think there's a lot of opportunities to make some, like, your first shorts, which is a really fantastic thing. We're lucky that way. But yeah, I think it's up to the person. Mm.
I actually heard J.J. Abrams speak at a Produced By conference in LA. That was one of the, a lot of elected Canadians got to do these missions to LA and to attend the Produced By conference. So yeah, J.J. Abrams was speaking, and you know, someone in the audience was like, you know, what film school should I go to? And you know, he's like, I get answered that question a lot. And he said, you know, and I'm totally just, you know, paraphrasing. He said, you know, you can go to film school and learn how to make a film, but life can teach you what films are about. And that just sort of stuck with me. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's what I think anyone can learn. Like, and I think I always struggle with that. I think if you're going to be a storyteller, you still need to understand the craft, right? Like, you still need to do the work and the research. And I think it is probably, you can learn by doing, you know, like by actually going ahead and make a short. And you're going to be surrounded, like, if as a director, you're surrounded by technicians who are experts in their field. And so, you know, you can, if you don't know something, just ask that question. But I think understanding the story you want to tell, I think is kind of like the core of whether or not I think your film will be successful.
So when we were talking the other day, one thing that you said that really kind of stuck with me, Deanne, was that
Uh-oh.
when oh no.
Sorry. I'm just kidding.
I thought it was very interesting. You said when you were doing an acting class, you did an exercise where you wrote down what you were willing to sacrifice in order to make your career happen, and how that kind of relates back to the balancing act that there's always, taking one path is always turning down other paths. I was just wondering if there's anything if you'd like to tell our audience about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this goes back to when I had just moved to Halifax and I was doing intro workshops on various aspects of the filmmaking process through short works. And there was an acting workshop taught by Rosemary Dunsmore, who is an actor from Toronto. And yeah, so one of the exercises was you had to write down, and I believe it was the top 3 things that you could live without. You know, what were like versus figuring out your needs versus your wants. And like she was saying, like if you really wanted something, then your needs will follow. And I kind of really hung on to that. And so I basically wrote like, what are the 3 things that you're willing to sacrifice in order to get where you want to go? You know, and I knew I wanted to direct. And so I wrote down those 3 things and on a piece of paper, and I carried that around with me for a long time. I know it sounds a little crazy, but you know, I think like I traveled around, no matter where I went, whatever apartment I moved to, I always had this piece of paper. But I think, you know, there were like a lot of sacrifices when I was first trying to make a short film, or you know, trying to figure out like I didn't have anyone sort of standing next to me saying, now this is what you should do next. I have a dog here. Sorry, this interrupted me. You know, like there was no one there kind of, you know, who had done what I had done that was close to me. So I was just constantly trying to figure it out. But I knew that it was going to take a lot of hard work. I think that's the one thing I really got from my dad, is that like he really worked hard to where he got in life. And, you know, he was a man who, you know, basically left school when he was in grade 9, and you know, he supported 5 kids and he had a very successful career, and he went back to school later in life. Like that was my role model in a lot of ways, of saying if you want something, you have to go out and work really hard at it. And you know, I used to say I'm really lucky that I got to direct features, and honestly it was just from a lot of hard work. And there was a lot of sacrifice, like where I was working in the day at CTV, and then at night I was like writing a script, or I was on the weekend I was helping, you know, produce my friend's short or production manage, or just kind of showing up and being there. And you know, while I saw a lot of my peers, you know, perhaps, you know, in more kind of lucrative kind of positions, I think it's, again, that's something that you struggle with, right? Because it wasn't a lot of money making. I was never drawn to it for money, rightly or wrongly. Like maybe like my financial advisor would say that's a terrible idea. But my heart, I just led my life by my heart. And I felt like I belonged. I found that's where I belonged. I belonged in a community that told stories. And I felt very passionate about wanting to tell my stories and working with people who helped me achieve that goal. I was very single-minded and driven about that. And you know, I have 2 kids now, so I mean, there's some things on that list that have kind of gone off to the wayside. But when I first started, there was a lot of sacrifice, and I think you have to be willing to do that in order to push your career ahead. It's no one's gonna hand you your career in film. It's just not gonna happen.
I think it's such a good point. I think people sometimes when they're seeing, they think of the glamour of what they're seeing on television or in a theater, but it's so much work. It's so much work. We can all attest to that. It's time consuming. You know, it's all the time. It's day, night, weekends, like really delineating that time. I feel like I work all the time, and like, you know, really carving out time. Like you really, it's a lifestyle balance for sure, but you know, it's a lot of work, you know, and that's why you have to have like that core of really being passionate and caring about story and all of that. That's so key to this work, because yeah, the rest of it is, you know, you get to go to the film festival for a few days and that's fun, but the rest of it is just like hardcore work. It really is. So you really have to enter this career with a lot of just passion for story and storytelling, you know, and the joy that you get from collaborating and the joy that you get from creating. But creating is really hard work, and it brings out, you know, a lot of self-criticism, and, you know, the days that you look at your script and you're like, oh, it's not bad. And then the next day is like, this is the worst thing ever. All of that, right? So besides that, it's just like, it's a slog. Applications, proposals, you know, your next project, you never get to rest on your laurels. It's not like, oh, this has come out and it's like, now I'm done. It's like, you just gotta, like, that's like, okay, what's the next project? Like, it's very, very much like that. So I think it's such a good point too. There is a sacrifice in your time, and you really have to, if you want to have a career, like a long-standing career, yeah, you have to put in a lot of time.
Yeah, it's all consuming. You know,
And
I
it
think when
doesn't
you're
change.
making, yeah, it doesn't change. Like no matter, um, you know, I think there's very few stories of people who make their first short and then they're making some Marvel movie. Like I think, you know, if that's what you're putting you're betting like this is going to happen to me, like it's so far few between. And I think if that's why, you know, if you want to make Marvel movies, then you probably shouldn't be living in Atlantic Canada, I would say. You know, like, you know, I think you have to be realistic. You figure out what kind of stories you want to tell, you know, and what kind of career you want to have. And that will dictate where you live and what you do, you
Yeah.
know, I
And
think
like,
for
tell the
sure.
stories you want to tell, because it's such a slog and because it's so much hard work. Like, it's
Yes.
really easy to fall in that, like, oh, I think people will like this. What do you want? What's your voice? Like, really? And that takes time to get to know that, but tell the stories you want to tell. And like, the collaboration's so wonderful. Like, collaborate with those people that you really enjoy. And, you know, and that, again, that stuff you learn over time and that sort of thing. But the work can be a slog, but it also can be really joyous and amazing. So it's really important to, reach for the things that you love and that you're interested in, and kind of trust that, like, trust yourself, you know. It's really, really important, I think. Yeah.
And I feel like I'm repeating what Wanda's just said, but I totally agree with Wanda, is what I'm trying to say. And that I think so many young filmmakers try to mimic what's already in the market. You know, what does the market want? Like, and I feel like what was a really sobering moment for me was I had made, you know, my second feature, Relative Happiness, screened at the market, at the Marché at Cannes. And so I got to go there and I walked around and it was just jaw dropping, inspiring, and also incredibly depressing to see so many films for sale. There was just wall to wall of movies, of films. And it was a real kind of eye opener to me of like, how do you possibly stand out? You know, and I do believe by telling that personal, intimate story. You know, I think if we're constantly trying to tell, I know this is a little bit off book, but of trying to tell stories that, you know, you think the market wants, or you think this is like, oh, people like comedy. So, but if comedy's not in your heart, why are you going to bother wasting your time doing a comedy? Like, you know, like it's really about, I believe it's finding your path, but it's also finding your voice, you know, and it does take a long time. I feel like I'm still trying to figure out,
It
you
evolves,
know,
your voice
it
changes.
evolves.
For
Yeah.
sure. Exciting. Like,
Mm.
this is the thing I love about this, is like, this is a craft that you're constantly learning, because every story is served differently. It's really exciting that way. And like, it's exciting when I work with other directors to see that and to understand that. And like, I find that really inspiring and hard, like, but it's like problem solving at its best, because it's visual and it's story and it's all those things I love. But it's, yeah, so finding those passions, and maybe your passion is blockbuster films, like, go for it.
Yeah.
Like, write those stories. It doesn't have to be like, and I know you don't mean this at the end, like intimate, that it's like your intimate story, but you have to love it. Like, you really have to, because there's days you're going to hate it, but you need to come back to those, like, but starting out with a story and an idea that you love will help you to nurture that and to stay with it. But if you're going in with lukewarm, or, you know, not believing it at the start, like, that's slog, because it takes years and years for something to actually come to fruition, you know. So it's important, yeah, for sure, to, you know, to stick with what, to do things, not stick, but to do things that you know and love. And that's why,
Yeah.
like, early on, for anyone young, like play with the medium, do fun things, like, just really put your work out there. And because that will help you develop that voice and what you know and how you like to collaborate and the kind of stories you want to tell. And you'll learn so much just by making mistakes and owning your mistakes and that sort of thing. And that's hard to do, but the earlier you do that, like that's what builds your voice. That's what builds your style, because you can like analysis and retrospect really teaches you a lot, and it's a really important part of the craft too. Just
Yeah.
I love that.
I think that's really important. Like I spent a lot of time from making my first short to doing my first feature. Like I worked on documentaries, I was the field producer. Like I took any opportunity that mostly paid me, but also brought me closer to a camera, so whatever those opportunities present to you, like, it was working. I found out like I actually really like documentaries. I actually like connecting with people and telling their stories. And there, I got a lot of enjoyment, but I also learned a lot from each of those experiences, because I was still telling a story, whether it was a documentary or a short film or, working on a doc series. Like it was still experience of trying to tell a story. And I think I kind of sucked up and absorbed all those opportunities.
Yeah, and for me, I realized early on that like the crew, that wasn't really my thing. Like I prefer the development, story editing. That's why I fell into that world. And like directing is different. Like it's completely different, as you both know, when you're directing a film versus crewing it. And crewing is great. You may go on and decide that I love crewing, but for me, I was like, no, I'd rather. The story development was kind of the area, but I did get in. I was in crews early on, or not in crews, but helping out. I helped out and volunteered for things, and I was just like, yeah, this is not the space unless I'm directing it. So if anybody wants me to direct anything, let me know.
So would you say that you have found your path, or would you say that you are still looking or still developing it from year to year?
I'd say, like, as a professional artist, like that's my path, that's my career. But yeah, I'm open to different things. Like, who knows what could come. Like, yeah, I think there's still opportunity with television and documentary and feature. So, I mean, I feel like that's all in the same world though. So, yeah, I feel like I'm on that. Maybe it'll change. I don't know. What do you think, Deanne?
Well, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. So, I think like I have found my path in terms of I want to direct and write. I don't think that's going to change. Like maybe, I don't know, in 10 years, maybe I want to produce more. I really don't know. I mean, I'm very much interested in directing right now. But, I also have gotten a lot of enjoyment recently by mentoring young directors. And I'm working with a young director in Nova Scotia who's about to make her first short through the same program I made mine 21 years ago. So I find that really kind of, coming full circle, then also working with this other filmmaker in New Brunswick. Like I feel like it's kind of fun to kind of look back about where you've come from. And it's been really a long, I feel like I've been a late bloomer. It's taken me a long time to kind of find my voice, I would say. And so I think I'm still developing my voice, but I feel like I've found my path.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. To go back to something you said in the last question, about if you want to make blockbusters, probably Atlantic Canada is not where your career is.
Yeah.
Did either of you ever consider moving out of Atlantic Canada, or did you move out of Atlantic Canada for part of your career?
I was really torn about moving to Toronto for a long time. And before I had my kids, like I was always on the fence. And again, this kind of goes back to, do you want to work on your dreams or other people's dreams? And I was always nervous that if I went to Toronto, I would never have made a feature. Like somehow I would be swept up in doing like I don't know, nothing, there's anything like lifestyle TV, or I'd end up just working at the CBC, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's a wonderful career. I had great years at CBC, but I was afraid I wouldn't be able to manage it as well. I live very modestly in St. John's in Newfoundland, and I think I've been managed to work in the industry solely because I live in Newfoundland. Whereas, as once I started directing TV and I worked on Doyle, I think that's really where it would have been an easier decision for me to kind of move to Toronto, because I had already had features under my belt, and now I want to direct more TV. And so Toronto is definitely the place to be if you want to be directing more television. It's more challenging from living in the regions. But yeah, no, I'm kind of, but I have a family, so it's sort of like, it's easy to move one person versus 4 people. So right now I'm content to be here in Newfoundland, but happy to like work elsewhere. I feel like I want Newfoundland as my base, but when I shot Christmas Reservations, that was in the States. I went to Nevada to film that. And so I feel like I'm happy to go to Vancouver for 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever it is. But I kind of feel like my base is definitely here in Newfoundland. And it just is not a solid business plan, but it's the one that I'm working with right now.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing for me. A little different. I never really seriously thought about going anywhere else besides Newfoundland, and that it would be my base. Not that I'm against, going somewhere and working for stints. And, my first film that I directed was, I would go back and forth in Montreal for that film, and happy to do that. But yeah, I get to work with directors across the country. I get to work with really experienced people here, Deanne, Latonia Hardery, Justin Sims, and of course, Annette Clark. I do so much work with the NFB. So this living here works for me. And I agree with Deanne, like it definitely takes away access to, the bigger, larger production, but money, but at the same time, like trying to navigate that world and what I would have to do here. I feel like I have more agency in the choices that I get to make here, because I can live more modestly. And I feel like it works really well for me being
That's
here.
great. That's great to hear. Have you found the past year that any more opportunities have been opening up in our new Zoom existence that we're living right here, right now?
I've been working with like a lot, like the development side for sure has been busy, and I've been asked to work on a bunch of different things because of people can't be in production. I think there's more development happening, so that's made me busier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't say, I've taught some workshops through Zoom, which have, so I don't actually need to travel to Halifax. I could just do it from here. So yeah, I think, that's been kind of fun. But for me, I've kind of turned down opportunities because I'm not unable to travel right now. So that's kind of hard, but it's just money. And
heartbreaking ones though, like opportunities to work, direct movies of the week, and like they're big opportunities you have to say no to, which is really too bad.
Yeah, so that was a joke about the money. But so it is what it is. I'm just kind of rolling with it, but it has given me more opportunity to really kind of figure out, like, what projects I really want to work on. So that's been great, and kind of developing some new ideas. And I've started to write again, which I've even though I find writing very difficult, I'm happy that I'm doing it. I can't say, oh, I'm so happy, I love my writing. Like, that's not the process for me. I still really struggle with it, but I'm happy that I can say that I'm struggling with it. Yeah.
Good. Self-confidence is something that we touched on a little bit, and how kind of a big part of both of your paths was just finding the self-confidence to say, yes, this is my path. Do you have any advice for young filmmakers, or even any age filmmakers who are reconsidering their path, who might be struggling with that?
Just try to get past your limit, like that that kind of self-criticism as early as possible. And the best way to do that is to work on small things and put it out there, put your work out there and go to workshops, and go meet people. Because what you realize really quickly is like everybody's feeling that way. And it doesn't really change like from the most experienced to, we always, because every new project brings in different insecurities. So I think really putting yourself out there, even just physically sitting in the room, you might be too shy to say anything, but just being there, it helps so much. And yeah, just like, submitting stories and scripts, and we have the arts and letters here. We have so many different things, the first time filmmakers program at NIFCO, and the Nickel has all kinds of great, filmmaking challenges, all the workshops, and the MJ Award, all these different things. There's so many things we can apply to in this province. And like, you might get no's, but like even putting together that proposal and learning how to put together proposal and all of that will help you. And then when you put it out the door, you're like, okay, it's just getting it out the door. The no, I think, is probably not going to be as hard, or the yes is so exciting because you will get yeses along the way as well. But just taking that risk of getting it out and doing it as early as possible helps you realize it's just not a big deal. I think that would be my best advice on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely tell my younger self to take more risks, not to play it safe. And I know like that comes like having the self-confidence to fail. Like I think I really suffered from perfectionism, like in having everything to be perfect and everything having to be like a success. And, like you are going to make mistakes. Not every film is going to be fantastic, but a short film, you can learn a lot if your film doesn't work out. It's okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, especially with short films, the more you practice, and I think it's just so much more accessible now with technology. You can make shorts on your iPhone, like just, I wouldn't wait for someone's permission to make a film. And I think I waited a long time for someone to say yes. Whereas now the technology is there where you don't need to have a funder say yes to your short. Like you can, start making shorts on a really like micro level.
And find your community, and that's a part of getting out there and stuff like that. Like find people to make stuff with, which makes it really fun too, and less lonely. And then together you can kind of talk about that, and like it just again helps take those risks and put things out there,
And you never feel like you have enough time. Like I felt like, I mean, I certainly have thought, kind of suffer from that imposter syndrome, like I just need to like do one more workshop, or I just need to like read one more book before I can do this, or I just need to do something, I just need to make another feature before I can do this. Like you can kind of really like you'll never feel like, I think you just need to throw yourself in there. Like, and I think I've always been incredibly hard on myself. I am my worst critic. I usually hate everything that I shoot, everything, like it takes me a long time to kind of fall in love with it again. And so like, just, it's tough, but, you just gotta put yourself out there, and if you wait for someone to shine the spotlight on you, you could be waiting for a very long time. And I feel like I wasted a long time, feeling that, if I got rejected, I would really wear that. Like if my short got rejected for some funding or whatever, I'd be like, oh, it's because I'm it was obviously a horrible project. But no, it was just like a committee, those 3 people who didn't jive with that project. Like maybe it wasn't ready. Like, so I think just learning to kind of learn how to deal with rejection is also a big part of trying to build your confidence, not taking things so personally. Because this is a very collaborative medium, like and it's a tough business. And so like, I think you just got to, have a thick skin, and it's taken me a long time to do that.
Yeah, I relate to that. I think we all go through a phase where we take every rejection as exactly a measure of what we're worth. Personally, I found what really changed that for me was being put in the position of having to reject other people, like being on some of these committees and boards. And you have this tiny pot of money and you have, 25 applicants who all have stellar, great projects, and you're just looking for a reason to pick 5 out of 25 when all of them are fantastic.
Yeah, that's so true. It
It
really
is true.
always changes your perspective completely. Because it is often just that there's just so many people and only so much money, Yeah. Yeah.
But just keep submitting.
Yeah. So I think we're coming up on our last few minutes here. So I just wanted to, I guess, to leave our audience with something, I wanted to ask you both, what are your kind of top 3 practical tips for people who are trying to find their path or figure out their path in their careers?
Top 3. That's a good question.
What we talked about was putting your work out there, applying for everything. Just send it all out, because you might get feedback, depending on the attend workshops. That would be another thing, like things like this, like getting to know your community. And I would say for me, become a story geek, like really become, because there's a story and then there's the craft, and the story is like, you got to get that story down, but there's crafting a story is a lot of work. It takes a lot of analysis. It takes a lot of time, and becoming an analytical thinker, like that's the profession. The craft is the profession of what we do. So, break stories, break scripts, break TV shows, break meaning like, break it down, getting to really do analysis, like that helps you find, especially things you love, and things you don't like, you start to really see things. So I would say spend time, become a complete geek. And then when you get in those rooms, you will meet all the other geeks, and being able to talk about those things and articulate other people's work will help you be able to articulate your work, because when you're writing proposals, you need to be able to articulate vision, what you want to say, all that sort of thing. So really start learning craft and becoming a geek about it.
Agreed. I would think, for me, I'm just thinking like, when I was starting out, I watched a lot of movies, like I knew I was really interested in doing comedies, and I love comedies, but I watched every film, like I attended film festivals. I knew you had to make shorts. So I watched a lot of shorts. What makes a great short? You're not necessarily going to start off making a feature film, right? You're going to start with shorts. So then and now online, you can access so many short films. So I think it's really important to, okay, what are the films, short films that were nominated for an Oscar this year? Like you can find out, like watch those films, like see the craft, like how do you tell, a great story? And I think you do your research, like read every book that you can get. Like I read a lot of books on how to make short films, or how to make a film, or I read a book on cinematography, like whatever you feel like you're lacking in. I mean, you can read and doing workshops, right? Like doing workshops are definitely a great way, and attend your local film festival, and I do agree, like find your community. I think if you do these workshops or various programs, you will find people to surround yourself with like-minded people that will help push you forward. I think that's really important. It's really hard sometimes you'll feel like you're on this lonely island, especially as a director. And so if you have other people who are also directors that you can kind of vent or that you need their support or get their feedback, like you need those people in your life. So I think you should always try to be networking. When I moved to Nova Scotia, it was on the weekend of the Atlantic Film Festival. And John Doyle's film, Extraordinary Visitor, was actually the opening night film, which was pretty exciting to me. I was like, oh my God, there's a film from Newfoundland that's opening at the film. But I went around that festival and I introduced myself as a director, even though I hadn't directed anything, which is so ridiculous. But I think if you are, I directed theater. I wasn't very specific on what I directed. So, but I feel like if you're gonna, if you say, for example, if you want to be a director, call yourself a director, and then figure, just try to then start making a short, like be the director. Like if you want to be a director, like if you're nothing, if you're going to be, the production designer, which is great, it's going to be, if you keep becoming the production designer, you're just further away from becoming the director. And I know like sometimes you want to find that balance. I think it's great to be part of any production, especially when you're starting out. You're gonna, okay, I'll do hair and makeup, sure. Like, like it's I think you can throw yourself at everything, but I think, whatever your contribution is going to be, if you're a storyteller, then make sure you're telling stories. And that's what, just be really clear on what you want to do, and try to hold fast to that. I don't know if I said 3, maybe I said 2. I don't know. Sorry.
Either way,
Math,
we got tips.
I'm not very good at math.
It worked for me.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, guys. I think you've imparted some words of wisdom, and it's just great to talk to you both.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, St. John's International Women's Film Festival.